I never expected my dad's retirement party to turn into the most humiliating moment of my life, or his. It was supposed to be a celebration, a tribute to a man who worked tirelessly for 40 years, providing for his family, building his reputation as a hardworking, no-nonsense provider. The room was filled with old friends, coworkers, neighbors, and extended family. Everyone was dressed in their best, raising their glasses to toast his dedication and legacy. There was laughter, stories of old times, speeches about his contribution to the company, and the respect he'd earned over decades. But what none of us expected, least of all me, was that his final speech would turn from nostalgic and touching into something bitter, controlling, and downright humiliating. He stood tall behind the podium, a glass of champagne in one hand, the other gesturing proudly toward me. He began with his usual tone, booming, confident, maybe even charismatic. He talked about the sacrifices he made for the family, the long hours, the things he gave up so we could live better. And for that, I did respect him. But then, the tone shifted. His words became sharp, calculated. He looked straight at me and said, "And now that my time working is over, I think it's only fair my son, who earns over $10,000 a month, mind you, starts giving back. Let's make it official, son. $10,000 a month. That's not too much to ask, is it?" The room fell silent. Everyone's smiles froze. My own heart dropped into my stomach. My face burned, not just from the pressure of being called out publicly, but from the betrayal behind his voice. There was no trace of love or pride, just entitlement. It wasn't a joke. He was serious. The silence was deafening. My own mother's face turned pale. She didn't know this was coming either. I forced a nervous chuckle. "Dad, are you joking?" He leaned forward into the microphone and said, "Dead serious. You make more than I ever did. You wouldn't have that job without me. I raised you. Now it's time to return the favor." It wasn't about appreciation. It wasn't even about need. My father had a generous pension, a paid-off house, savings from years of working. He wasn't struggling. This wasn't about survival. This was about control. My entire childhood came rushing back in a flood. The way he used to measure our worth by how obedient we were, how every favor came with strings attached, how he once grounded me for weeks because I didn't say thank you loud enough. When he bought me a used bicycle, how he treated our accomplishments like trophies to prop up his own ego. And now, in front of hundreds of people, he wanted to stake a claim on my adult life, on my success, on my bank account. There was a pause, a long one. And then, I did something I never thought I'd do. I took the mic from the stand, turned to the crowd and said, "I love my father. I always have." But what he just said, that's not love. That's ownership. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My dad's face twisted in shock. I continued, "I owe my father respect, and I've given it all my life. I owe him gratitude, and I've shown it. But I do not owe him a monthly paycheck. I do not owe him control over my future. I do not owe him ownership of my hard work. And I certainly do not owe him a public shaming for not handing over my salary." The room had gone from silent to tense. Some people nodded slowly. Others looked horrified. A few looked down, clearly embarrassed for him. But I wasn't done. "You taught me to work hard. You taught me to be independent. You told me that was the dream, to be better than you were, to succeed. And I did. But if you think that means I owe you a part of my soul in return, you've misunderstood what fatherhood is about." I handed the microphone back to the host and walked off stage, not storming, calmly, steadily, with the weight of years falling off my shoulders. Behind me, my father was frozen. The man who had always commanded every room he walked into now stood speechless. After the event, people came up to me, quietly, supportively. A few older men nodded and said, "Good for you," one woman whispered. My father did the same thing to me. "You were brave. My mother approached me with tears in her eyes. "I didn't know he was going to do that," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I just nodded. I didn't need an apology from her. But I could see the cracks in the image of the man she had spent decades protecting. My father didn't speak to me for weeks. When he finally did, it wasn't to apologize. It was to say he didn't understand why I'd humiliated him. And that was the final proof I needed that he truly didn't see what he had done wrong. I told him I wasn't angry. I told him I wasn't trying to hurt him. But I was no longer willing to shrink myself to fit inside his shadow. I had my own life now, my own values, my own path. He hung up without saying goodbye. That was over a year ago. Since then, our relationship has been distant, civil, at best, but honest. He no longer tries to control me, and I no longer pretend he didn't try. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give is freedom, but sometimes the most painful lesson a child has to learn is how to take that freedom back. And if it takes standing up to the person who once held everything over your head, then so be it. I don't regret speaking up at that retirement party, but I think he regrets asking me for my salary. Because in that moment, he didn't just lose my money. He lost the illusion that he still owned me. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only thing he truly wanted to keep.